Here's a significant update on the Miami Hurricanes' top transfer portal target.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and also co-host of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We are free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Damien Martinez, top running back available, one of the top transfer portal players available, period. Standout running back from Oregon State, rushed for nearly 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. True featured back, very durable. He's been Miami's number one transfer target, and the herd is thinning when it comes to the teams that are competing for Martinez's signature. Let's go through the timeline with you for Martinez. Right after he jumped into the portal, Miami and running backs coach Matt Merritt went in home with him, scheduled an official visit, which is coming up this coming weekend, Friday through Sunday, I believe, is when Martinez is going to be on campus at Miami. Prior to that, he did take visits to Arizona and to Mississippi State. Here's the significant update. Damien Martinez was scheduled to be in Kentucky today for the next couple of days. He announced on his social media on Monday morning, Kentucky visit is canceled. So you can take Kentucky out of the running. Now, we've liked the way Miami's been trending here with Martinez since he jumped into the portal. I think Miami is the team with the momentum for him, and we'll see if the Hurricanes can try to close that this weekend. But you can take Kentucky off the list right now. I'd say out of Arizona and Mississippi State, I'd probably be considering Arizona to be Miami's top contender. But this is one the Miami Hurricanes are going to try to close this weekend when Martinez comes to town. Speaking of which, I want to answer some few questions here from the Locked On Canes insiders who are very curious about the comings and goings of the transfer portal. We get a question from our guy, Trey. I think Trey's getting a little impatient now that the portal's been open for a week and Miami hasn't officially landed anybody. He says, hey, Donno, you said we would be aggressive in the portal, yet no commitment. Any news about Miami's potential first? And so not just with Damien Martinez, I think Miami is hoping that this weekend coming up can be a decisive weekend with multiple transfer portal targets. And I know the portal's been open for a week. You've seen certain players, some really good players, some, not as significant players committing to other schools, coming off the board. Miami is yet to land somebody. Yes, I did say Miami would be aggressive. And my thought on that hasn't changed. Just because Miami hasn't officially landed a commitment in the first week, you see the way Miami's been aggressive in targeting certain players, scheduling visits, and at a certain point, you've got to go sometimes by the players' timelines, not by your own. But I think Miami does hope this can be a decisive weekend coming up because, yes, you have Damien Martinez scheduled to visit Friday through Sunday. The Oregon State transfer running back has been Miami's number one target from the beginning. Also visiting this weekend, someone who's got that Lance Guidry, Chevis Jackson connection, cornerback Dyoni Hill from Marshall is going to be visiting this weekend as well, along with Damien Martinez. I don't think this one has been made official yet in terms of a visit, but I know Miami's been working on scheduling something and hopefully for this weekend because I think they want a lot of these top targets to come in together at the same time to kind of experience that visit with one another. Miami is working to get Houston wide receiver Sam Brown down this weekend. The Hurricanes are considered to be the early favorites for Brown. And you also need to remember a couple things. Number one, Miami's not trying to add a dozen guys. They're trying to add, somewhere between 4 to 6 players for a couple of important reasons. Number one, you do have some young players on the roster. You don't want to be recruiting over all of these guys because there are certain players you think can develop and you don't want to bring in players potentially in front of them on the depth chart. The other thing is, it's not like Miami's flush with roster spots. More players are going to leave in the portal. As of right now, with Caleb Spencer being the most recent exit, Miami still is one spot over the roster limit. Now, you don't have to be at or under that roster limit until the day fall camp starts, so you have some time to still manage your roster. But at the same time, I'm not expecting 10 more players to leave. I'm expecting maybe 5 or 6 more players to leave. So you do the math. You're going to have maybe 4 to 5 open roster spots. So it's not like Miami is opening up the floodgates and trying to bring in a ton of players. Miami's trying to bring in a handful of hopefully difference-making impact players. And more players are still yet to enter the transfer portal. Because remember, a lot of prominent programs either just played their spring games this past weekend over the past couple of days. Some haven't even done so yet. So some players don't decide to hit the portal until after the spring game when they can assess where they stand on a roster. So, but to answer your question, Trey, I know you've been very patient the first week of the transfer portal. At some point, Miami is going to land commitments, and hopefully they land some of the guys that we're talking about being the top targets. We get a really interesting question about the running back room from Mary Kane, who says, hey, what are the chances that if Miami gets Damien Martinez, maybe redshirting Mark Fletcher, let Fletcher get fully healthy and not take any unnecessary hits? He says we have a great running back room, so I think it could work out for Fletcher in the long run. Okay, so to answer that question, Mary Kane, about the possibility of just telling Fletcher, take the whole season off and recover. We can use your red shirt that Miami didn't get to use last year because he was a stud last year, burned the red shirt pretty quickly. This would all depend on Fletcher's recovery. There's a lot that I don't know, and maybe even Fletcher doesn't know yet about how quickly he's going to be fully back from the injury. But yes, if Miami is able to add Damien Martinez, it puts a lot less pressure on Mark Fletcher to rush back from a tricky injury. He reportedly had a Liz Frank foot injury, which is one that can take a while to come back from. Everybody refers to that as a tricky injury. But okay, if Mark Fletcher were to get a clean bill of health before the season or the early part of the season, then I think it would be advantageous for Miami to have both Martinez and Fletcher as a 1-2 punch. Just imagine how good your back. There are other, like you mentioned, really good players. I want to see Chris Johnson get a lot of burn this year. Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, I think, is making the case to get some playing time. A.J. Allen had some really good moments last year. We'll see how Jordan Lyle looks when he comes in this summer. He's enrolling from St. Thomas Aquinas. So there are other talented players in that running back room, no question. But, the idea of as long as Fletcher would be ready in time to play most, if not all, of the season, can you imagine Damien Martinez and Mark Fletcher in that same backfield, staying fresh and just wearing down defenses? What a luxury that would be. What a luxury. But listen, I on the flip side of that, Mary Kane, if Fletcher, let's say, is not fully healthy or if they're not fully confident in his foot until later in the season, then yeah, I could see how giving him a redshirt year, that could be an advantageous scenario. And, the other part of it, and I can't answer this, but, people talk about this with Liz Frank injuries that, if there's any risk of re-injury by bringing him back too quickly, then you would need to consider the option of giving him as much time to recover as possible. But my hope would be that Fletcher is fully recovered. Remember, you're talking about, an 18, 19-year-old elite athlete. They tend to recover more quickly than people like you and me. Right? I mean, if I had a Liz Frank injury, I'd probably be on the shelf for much longer than Fletcher would be. So, if there's any risk of re-injury or him not being good to go, you can be cautious, especially if you land Damien Martinez. You have the luxury of being cautious. But on the flip side of that, if Fletcher can be ready to go, you have that luxury of having two really dominant players in your backfield. And so that would be a nice opportunity for Miami. We get a question that we're going to answer on the other side about intel on potential transfer portal players. And that gives me an opportunity to kind of reset the news cycle here from a Miami perspective, because yes, the transfer portal things do develop quickly. New players enter, players leave, players you may have liked commit to other places. There's a lot to get to. New updates on Miami targets, including Damien Martinez. I've got more to say on him. Sam Brown, Elijah Badger, Jason Zandamela, Simeon, Barrow, KJ West. We have a lot still to get to on this episode. So you know what you want to do, folks? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And if you're a small business owner, I hope you're only getting started with LinkedIn Jobs. If you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise. With live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle, the Locked On NFL mock draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so folks, we're talking transfer portal here on this Monday, and this is a huge weekend coming up for the Miami Hurricanes. I cannot emphasize that enough. We get a question from Lamont on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. By the way, guys, if you want to join the Locked On Canes Insiders chat, where you get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, transfer portal and recruiting scoops, one-on-one questions and answers, you can join. Try it free for 2 weeks. Click the link in the show description below, Locked On Canes Insiders. And then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there. So the question we get from Lamont is simple question, complicated answer. He says, any more intel on potential transfers? All right, so let me start with the priority targets here. I mentioned receiver Sam Brown from Houston. Miami Hurricanes are considered favorites due to his past with Shannon Dawson, coached him at Houston. It also seems like Brown and Cam Ward have a relationship. They were working out together last week. So I think the top contenders, Miami might be running out in front here, but with him not having taken visits and all his visits yet, this can obviously be something that can evolve. Miami is considered to be favorites right now, and I think the top contenders for Miami are LSU and Texas A&M. That's according to Pete Nakos from On3. LSU and TAMU are the other teams to watch out here for Brown. And by the way, Sam Brown, I was looking through the rankings this morning in the transfer portal. Sam Brown is the top-ranked available wide receiver in the transfer portal. This guy would start on most teams. Brown, for example, he's rated higher than Arizona State wide receiver Elijah Badger, who a lot of people are talking about. And we did talk about Badger on our Sunday episode because Badger had just become available. He entered the transfer portal on Saturday night. Now, there is one outlet that has reported Miami being interested in Badger. I have been told, though, that Miami is yet to make a push for him. So I can't say for sure that Miami is interested. And if Miami isn't, or if they haven't pushed for him yet, that might be because Miami feels good about where they stand with Sam Brown. Because no, I don't think Miami's taken 2 receivers in this portal. I think they're looking for one guy. And if Brown is the one that is the priority, I think they're going to dot every I and cross every T to try to get him here before they really start zoning in on other targets. So that's what we're looking at with Sam Brown. And yeah, let me reiterate. I think this weekend could be make or break with Damien Martinez, in my opinion. Miami Hurricanes nailed the in-home visit by all accounts last week. Most outlets consider the Hurricanes to be the team to beat for the number 1 available running back. He had short visits with Arizona and Mississippi State, canceled his visit to Kentucky. Miami's the next stop. Hurricanes will be able to make that last impression with him and can hope to get some good news coming out of the weekend. And, I think for Martinez, the opportunity to play with Cam Ward is attractive. I think the opportunity to play behind Miami's offensive line is a plus. It's a very running back friendly system. Even though it's like there's only one football, right? And Cam Ward is going to want to get his. Miami's got wide receivers who want targets, running backs. So let's just hope Miami's offense is so good moving the chains next year that everybody can get their touches, right? But, definitely being – and Mario Cristobal has a history going after big, powerful, featured running backs. Damien Martinez, he'd be perfect here. Like this – he'd be – and I'm sure he'd also be perfect in Arizona. He'd be perfect in Mississippi State. But he would definitely be perfect here if Miami can get that one over the finish line. It sounds like Miami was interested in Florida State transfer defensive back Greedy Vance, but Vance committed to USC last night. So he hadn't made it down. I think Miami maybe would have liked to bring him down for a visit, but he is committed to the Trojans, so you can cross him off your list. He is not available. Now, a player that I really liked, I don't know if Miami ever really pursued him, but that was Pitt defensive end Dayon Hayes. He committed to Colorado yesterday, or it might have been this morning. Either way, he's now a Buff. Now, I wanted to bring up Dayon Hayes, even though I don't know if Miami was interested, but since I've mentioned him a couple times on the show, I wanted to bring him up just to let you guys know he's no longer an option if he was to begin with. But a player who is definitely an option. Miami seems to really like interior offensive lineman Jason Zandamela. He's got all 4 years of eligibility remaining. He can play center or guard, but I think becoming the heir apparent to Zach Carpenter at center seems like the best fit if Miami can get Zandamela. Something going for Miami is Zandamela is really close friends with Isaiah Thomas. They went to the same high school, Clearwater Academy International. Isaiah has enrolled at Miami to play safety. So maybe if we can work that friendship and get them to want to play here together. Zandamela, who initially went out west to USC, he wanted to come back closer to home. So, Miami is regionally could check off that box. Florida and Georgia are believed to be the top competitors with Miami so far for Zandamela. And a lot of people think Florida State could get into the mix. Remember, Florida State, I think today is the day that they can actually start contacting players, like officially, right? I mean, anything before today was tampering. So if Florida State is going to get into the mix for Jason Zandamela, that officially starts today, but it could be Miami versus Georgia versus Florida State there. Another player, a couple of other players who are options at defensive tackle, flipping to the other side of the football. Simeon Barrow of Michigan State, CJ West of Kent State. Those appear to be the top targets on the defensive line for Miami right now. I think CJ West is a good player with a lot of potential, smaller program, of course. So I would say Simeon Barrow is the bigger prize, as he was Michigan State's top defensive player the last couple of years. Miami seems to be battling LSU for both of these guys. LSU is going all in, trying to revamp their defensive line. So they're going after everybody. So it seems like, and I don't know, LSU might take both of these guys if they both wanted to go there. Miami seems to be battling LSU for both. Another one, a player we haven't really talked about on this show, but he seems to be emerging as a target. Miami reportedly has interest in Louisville linebacker Jaylin Alderman. Now, I personally haven't seen linebacker as being as much of a need, but it is true that behind Kiko Maui-Noa and Wesley Basaint, behind those guys, there's a ton of inexperience there. And you lost a couple of experienced guys, Corey Flagg and KJ Cloyd no longer being with the program. That may not impact the starting lineup this year, but it does impact the depth. And Jaylin Alderman at Louisville, he started all 13 games at linebacker last year, and he was coached previously by Miami linebackers coach Derek Nicholson. D-Nick was at Louisville before, so I'm sure there's a relationship there. So we'll see what happens with that one. Now, I wanted to mention a player who's leaving Miami, who there is an update on Jakari Brown. I don't know where he's going to end up, but I do know Brown has a visit lined up midweek at UCF. I think their offense would be a really good fit for him. Now, I don't know if Brown ends up at UCF. I don't know how that would affect KJ Jefferson, who's their penciled-in starter next year. I know he's in some legal trouble back in Arkansas. Supposedly UCF knew about it. It was related to a traffic arrest. UCF reportedly knew about that. Jefferson only has 1 year of eligibility left anyway, so maybe Brown competes with him to start right away, or maybe Brown sits behind him for a year, takes over next year. But UCF is definitely a team to watch for Jakari Brown, and I hope he finds the best fit for him because I'm absolutely rooting for him. All right, we got interesting questions about if, and this is not just a Miami thing, if big programs are playing a dangerous game when you've got talented young players, yet you start grabbing veterans from the portal. What does that mean for developing the young guys? Like, are we hurting the potential development of young players by going out and grabbing guys to essentially replace them on the depth chart or take their starting jobs or their second string spots? Is the juice worth the squeeze, as we like to say on that one? So we'll answer more questions when we come back. You want to keep it locked, folks, right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I've been having so much fun and winning some money. Florida Panthers bet came through on Sunday. Folks, FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Network. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got a couple of really good questions from one of our insiders, LL Cool Matt. Let me handle the first of these. The Sam Brown guy from Houston, he says, seems like a very talented wide receiver, but honestly, he sounds like another Isaiah Horton who's simply gotten more opportunities on the field at this point in his career than Horton has. Sounds like everybody is very happy about the progress that Horton has taken, and he was poised for a big season. So is it worth spending big money, he says, on someone we might already have on the roster when we have bigger deficiencies on the roster in areas like the defensive backfield? It's a great question because, Matt, whether you intended to or not, you touch on something that I talk a lot with behind the scenes on people who cover college football teams, whether it's Miami or anyone else, big prominent programs who are active in the transfer portal. There's a term that we use called recruiting over your recruits, right? That when you have, young players, you talk about developing, guys who are maybe freshmen, sophomore right now. Is it kind of bad mojo to, bring in an experienced transfer guy at their position? Because that may take something away from these younger players' development, and it may take something away from these younger players' opportunities. And let me tell you, the fact that, Matt, you're clearly aware of that issue. I'm clearly aware of that issue. You bet your butt Mario Cristobal and his staff are aware of that tightrope that they have to walk, right? Because they invest so many resources and so much time into these recruiting classes where they had a top 7 class in 2023, a top 5 class in 2024. And they definitely don't want to, bring in guys to recruit over these players to potentially take opportunities away or take something away from their development. So something we all have to realize is that, when I'm able to watch, let's say, 45 minutes of a lot of these 2-hour practices. And, you guys, you hear the things that I have to say, you read blogs, you watch other content creators. We know a certain amount of what's happening, but we only know the tip of the iceberg. So and I'm not talking about Isaiah Horton specifically, because you guys know I love him, but in general, Mario Cristobal and his staff have a better idea about which of these young recruits are actually ready to step up and play significant roles right away, who needs more time to do that. And yes, in some cases, you may recruit players who turn out to not be what you expect, or maybe don't fit your system the way you expect. And sometimes it's best for certain players to go seek opportunities elsewhere, where you always have these opportunities to build, rebuild, and evolve your roster through the transfer portal. So I think there are some cases where maybe we think a certain young player is going to be an impact guy, and maybe coaches realize that's probably not going to happen. Definitely not here. Maybe it can happen somewhere else. Now, talking specifically about these wide receivers, I think, honestly, I could see a scenario where you bring in a transfer portal receiver and he doesn't necessarily take a starting job away from Isaiah Horton. I'm not high on Isaiah. I think Isaiah can be one of your starting receivers this year and can thrive, right? So I guess worst case scenario for Horton would be if someone does come in and take his starting spot, I think Horton and others can still get significant playing time, but Miami can raise the floor and ceiling of their receiver room. Because something you do have to remember, folks, that, Xavier Restrepo has done a lot of great things at Miami. He has proven he's going to be a number one target, is going to put up numbers. He and Cam Ward look like they fit together like spaghetti and meatballs. It's a great combination, right? Jacoby George had an awesome year last year. Outside of those two guys, you don't have a lot of proven players in this receiving room. You do have, as you mentioned, Matt, a lot of young players who have yet to get big opportunities, but also have yet to show they can be reliable for 12, 13, 14 games, however many games Miami plays this year. So I do think that, yes, you're always walking a tightrope when it comes to transfer portal, recruiting over your players. You got to, at a certain point, trust these coaches that they know what they need. And you also have to remember, Miami's going to try to win something significant this year. Cam Ward is too good not to try and win something this year. So when we talk about an all-in season, right, sometimes you have to look at certain positions on the field and say, yes, we've got a lot of talent there. But when you're talking about the position like receiver that connects directly with your quarterback, who you feel very highly of throughout games, I think you do feel a certain initiative you have to take of surrounding Cam Ward, not only with the best possible talent, but the most possible proven talent. And keep in mind, Miami does like to rotate receivers. You might even see scenarios where there's 4 receivers on the field at one time or more. So, yeah, listen, I take nothing away from Isaiah Horton, who I think could very well be a starter at Miami. If not, he's going to play significant snaps this coming year. But when you've got a lot of unproven youth behind your top 2 receivers right now on the roster, unproven, a lot of potential. But I think if Miami sees an opportunity at wide receiver to add someone who can raise the floor and perhaps also raise the ceiling of your room, a guy who's a proven playmaker, I think you feel a certain obligation to surround Cam Ward with the most possible talent this coming year. And, you talk about other positions of need. I agree. Defensive back is definitely a need. Running back is a need. They're looking to fill that, of course, with who they have visiting this weekend. I think Miami is going to look to check off both of those boxes. Just because they may bring in a receiver does not mean they won't also add a defensive back, if that makes any sense. We also get a question from LL Cool Matt about Colby Young. He says, hey, do you have any insight as to how in the world we let Colby Young go? What I heard was that he wanted more NIL and Miami didn't want to pay. Who knows if that's true or not? I don't know if that's true or not, but I'll say this about Colby Young. All due respect to Miami, but if you have a year of eligibility left and you have an opportunity to go play at Georgia, where they're favored to win a national title this year, and for good reason, it's hard to pass that up, right? I mean, you get an opportunity to go play for the team that are the odds-on favorites to win a title, didn't win it last year, but won the 2 previous years. That's a hard opportunity to pass up. So it's like, you got to remember, not every player was shown the door. Like some players, may decide, hey, maybe there's a different opportunity. I think a change of scenery can be good for Colby Young. So, it is what it is. Sorry to see him go. He had a great spring game for Georgia. But, it is unfortunate. We move on to the next guys. And, maybe if Miami, maybe Isaiah Horton ends up being even better than Colby Young was. I think Isaiah's got a very high ceiling. Maybe Miami brings in Sam Brown, who ends up having a bigger impact than Colby did. It's still possible to upgrade. We get a question from Tim from Port Orange, who says, hey, so now that spring practices are over and they're winding down their classroom activities, what does their schedule look like until the fall? I think very, very soon they start, again, a pretty rigorous offseason workout schedule. And I'm not sure if that has started already. They may get a little wind down time after that spring game last week, but they're going to be back in the weight room with Coach Feld and company pretty quickly if they're not already. And then, another important benchmark is early June when the next batch of freshmen arrive. They're going to hit the weight room. Even when players are like, quote unquote, off, a lot of these guys, even when they go back home for short vacations, they get players together, they throw and catch and they work out. It's, being a college football player, it really is a full-time job. And that's, one of the reasons why it's important that NIL and players getting paid is a thing now, because they put in full-time hours, a lot of these guys. And then, I expect fall camp. Fall camp is probably going to start like at the very end of July. So they'll get a little bit more than a month of work in for the August 31st opener against Florida. But they're going to stay pretty active until fall camp starts. I think there was a couple questions we didn't get to. My apologies on that, but a busy episode today. My friends, thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.